Thank you very much. I think I'm going to modify the agenda a little bit, and I'm sure I'll get in trouble later from my staff for doing so. But what I'd like to do is somewhat combine the last two, which is a question and answer session as well as kind of somewhat of a call to action. And I have a couple of questions, and I know we do have a few people in the audience that are joined us today. And if you would like to ask a question, there are 3x5 cards that staff have and are happy to provide you, and they will bring those up so we can ask the panelists. If you have a specific question for a panelist, please feel free to note that as well. I think this was a great opportunity to hear some of the challenges that we're all facing, some of the programs and creative methods that collectively we've come up with to try to deal with the issue. I guess one of the questions that I have, and I think it sparked it because one of the panelists, I believe it may have been Samantha, talked about, as a result of the Dr. Phil show, people stepping up that we didn't expect, that added value to this effort. And I think that the question that I have is, has anyone else experienced a segment of the population or something of that nature that we don't expect, that we don't look to as we think about this drug issue, but really is a resource within the community that you've experienced and that can be helpful, that we could all be looking at reaching out to?
I guess I would start. I think we've tried to make some efforts to engage the faith community, and I know that you mentioned you have 2 pastors on your task force. I think we're starting to see that a lot more in local government, where the faith community is engaged in our efforts. And so for Santa Clarita, we've reached out to some of our faith-based organizations, and we're going to make more of an effort to do that. We are finding that we have a growing church community here in Santa Clarita. They offer multiple programs, and the kids that are in our schools, the kids that we see going through the doors of our programs, many of them are engaged in their churches. So I think if we can access those faith-based organizations and collaborate and share information and resources and strategies, I think we're going to be more effective in reaching people, especially as we talk about parents. Because I do have a question later for the panel in terms of how we better engage the parents.
I think for us, the faith base is something it's an important component, and they did come. There wasn't a surprise. The Boys and Girls Club, not a surprise. The schools, all of these, not a surprise to us. What surprised me, because of the overwhelming numbers, have been former addicts, not on probation. They're not working off a case. They're done. They're clean, but they don't want their brother, someone else's younger brother or younger sister to go through what they did. Besides the jail aspect of it, the life that they were living because of their addiction to heroin and how it changed them. Often many of these addicts had either a promising career, and we had a high school athlete who overdosed and died at Thousand Oaks High School. We've seen it. So some of the segment of people that in law enforcement we're going to deal with on an enforcement basis, after they're done and they're clean, coming to us and wanting to help us, wanting to talk to kids, identifying kids who are having a problem, they've offered to talk to them, and we've utilized that, and we do think it makes a difference. Anecdotally, I don't have any hard numbers for that, but it's a segment that I think we were a little surprised to see, and such strong numbers.
And I'll add to that, Ken. I talk a lot about shifting mindset. To me, I'd rather shift the mindset of the kids to lead a drug-free life and try to limit some of the enforcement. I want all of my enforcement primarily going to drug dealers, and I think we've talked a lot about that. But the reality is, I think that we've all realized that law enforcement has shifted its mindset. And as soon as we do that and realize it's not just enforcement, it opens the doors to the faith-based organizations and the ex-addicts and all those individuals that want to come now and help, because we're not just talking about enforcement anymore. And I think that's an important component.
I was just going to say, we have had some involvement just with the community events. In addition to having drug boxes or drug drop-off boxes at each of our sheriff stations, we also have a portable one, and we've been able to take it out to community events and promote drug take-back days at those events, whether they're faith-based schools, whatever it may be. But, one event that we had over 150 pounds of prescription medication that was turned in one of those events. So it's been a successful program. We also take, take part of the National Drug Take-Back Days. There's 2 of those a year, one in April, one in October. I think that's well known, but those have been some things that we've been able to do as well, reaching out just to the community in itself.
I think it's difficult to attract sometimes the parents who need it most, who need this information the most. Some of them are in denial, or some just plain don't care. I think that having a captive audience, and the vast majority of them will go to the back to school nights, and so there's an opportunity there to put out a message. I've gone to probably almost all of the Not One More group meetings. It's not the heroin task force, it's just their board meetings and so forth. And usually 100 or so people will be in attendance. There have been a number of speakers that have asked the audience how many in here are recovering addicts or have a loved one who's an addict, and almost the whole room raises their hand. So that's not the audience necessarily. They already know the message. The message needs to get out to the people that need it most, and they're the ones that are sometimes least willing to listen.
If I may add, Ken, one of the most meaningful pieces, I think, of testimony that we've received at the Heroin Task Force meetings have been from the parents who come up and say, my kid was a straight A student, I was a stay-at-home mom, my kid was on leadership, my kid was in soccer, my kid did all the right things, we did all the right things, and my kid's still an addict. Or, I lost my child. And I think that as we go through this and as we continue to raise awareness, what we're doing is reducing the stigma from these middle-class families that aren't used to having to deal with these issues. And as we continue to get the educational resources out there, they realize they're not dealing with this alone, and that it sees no class, it sees no income level, and that you can do all the right things. And, we're reaching these populations that oftentimes don't need it, but still can become very valuable resources.
I think one of the panelists mentioned that they have a few programs in place, and they've had to be very creative because they actually don't have any funding in place. So I guess the follow-up question to that is, collectively there are several programs that that are running in all the different cities. What creative funding sources have you guys found to be able to provide these things on an ongoing basis? Anybody have any bright ideas?
We actually, with the Parent Project, the department absorbed the cost of sending the officers to the training to reduce the overtime component, because typically it's in the evening and that is not their normal working hours. They've actually volunteered to adjust their hours so that we reduce the overtime component. And Eric had mentioned how many people might show up the first night, get the book, and think that's good enough, so I'm gonna blow the next 9 weeks off. What we do is we ask them for a deposit, and we'll hold the check. And if they complete the course, they get it back. Some of the funding that we get for the printed materials and so forth that we hand out for the Parent Project comes through our police foundation, which is an arm of, kind of a funding arm of the police department.
For the city of Santa Clarita, we have multiple funding sources that we use to support our program. But in terms of creativity, I would say for us, we have a high volunteer rate in Santa Clarita. We find that most of our community members are very engaged and they give their time to the community. So one of the ways that we support them is we send volunteers to be trained to become parenting instructors. And so they are able to, we support them through that training, and then they're able to provide some of our parenting classes and parenting workshops that we put on through our family education program. Another way that we can work together, that we have worked with local agencies, is through our family education program. We collaborate with the College of the Canyons, who has a foster care and kinship program, and they receive funding, I believe, through the state for that program. So we cross-market our parenting classes. They hire instructors, and it benefits the entire community. Finally, in working with the school district, we both offer in-kind services to one another. We have local nonprofit organizations that donate their time. So we're finding that many people, when it comes to protecting the lives of our youth and our families, that you're not going to really find many people that say no, and they will find a way to provide support.
You know, it seems consistent that all of the efforts that our agencies, I guess, sparked the initiatives that we put forth were a story, were an incident, a death. And as we're all painfully aware that when someone overdoses, particularly a young child or a youth, it certainly emotions run very high. And with emotions running high, you have a lot of people who have a lot of energy, and you have a lot of people coming together wanting to work on an issue. Unfortunately, over time, that energy and that emotion dissipates a little bit. How do you guys maintain a sense of urgency that just because there isn't a death today or yesterday, but we're looking more to the future and trying to prevent this, how do you maintain a sense of urgency within your communities?
We, you know, that same message that you're speaking of, Ken, we give to the youth. Jim and I spoke after a death to all the juniors and seniors at one high school. And there's tears, there's flowers, everyone's very upset. And I asked them, what are you going to do in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, in 6 months? Because you'll find the same group of kids at the same parties with a little time and distance. And what choices are they going to make in college? Because this awful tragedy will soon go away. Be very few that truly will learn from it, and that will change them. So to answer your question, we stay on them, for lack of a better term, all year long. And our plan is, as I mentioned, the Stand Proud program from the 5th grade. From the middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th, and high school, we hit them with every resource. So we just don't have one planned thing in May. Okay, the kids are expecting this, the cops are coming, this is what we're doing, and then all year long, nothing else. Our SROs are constantly interacting with them. We constantly have meetings with people. There's, for the high school level, it's mandatory for the principals to make it mandatory for kids, any kid who's involved in athletics or any club, they have to meet with Jim and I. Because we'll ask them, you know, who wants to be here? And no one will raise their hand. And of course it's mandatory because that's where they sign off to get their lockers, all their sports stuff, or band, whatever they have going. And this is the message we talk about. We educate the parents, but we try to generate conversation between the child, the young adult, and the parents, whether it's technology safety or substance abuse, whatever the topic. So we just stay on them consistently all year long. Sometimes we've had as little as 2 people at a meeting, and Jim and I, all the way to a few hundred. But if it's one parent who cares to hear about the information, we'll do it. We use the press. Someone had mentioned the Acorn. We use them and the local press, the local media, all the time. We send information out to kids all the time just to stay on top of it all year long, so it's a consistent message. But we don't tell them, you know, they know it's wrong to do this. We don't, and they expect me to say, well, don't do this. I talk to them about their choices. And I give them real examples of people that not only have lost their life, but a choice that they made where they didn't get a college scholarship or something that impacted someone's life. So that's our approach. It's not scientific, but it's just human-based, and it's just staying on top of it.
I'm sorry, John. One of the things also with that, once we start that communication and we let the parents know that our SROs are available to their students all the time. One of the things that we implemented, the chief implemented just this last year, was all of our SROs now have Twitter accounts as well. It's the school at their email address, and so that the students know that they have the account. If they want to send something in anonymously, they can send it in. They can just send a tweet going, "Hey, this guy's got dope on him right now. This child has a weapon. This person made a threat," and that information is immediately available to the SRO who's on campus. And we'll allow that communication 24/7. It's just if they get that message and they're at home and their phone's on and they hear it, they're going to call the watch commander. We're going to get resources on the problem right away. And just knowing that the school district just knowing and the students knowing that they have that ability to reach out and grab us, that we're there to help them. And they, like I said, they know we're not there just for the enforcement. We have a genuine goal of keeping them all safe. And if you ask any child in any school, they want to be safe too. That's what they're looking for from us.
Yeah, I think our approach is not much different than Thousand Oaks. It's that idea of a consistent message and making sure that the people that are in place are there for them. For example, we had an SRO recently that went off on an injury. We took the time to replace that SRO. We didn't just live with one short one less SRO. So we always want to make sure that they're there for them and provide that consistent message. And it's going to ebb and flow a little bit. When you do have a death, there's going to be a high point of emotion, and the message is going to be much stronger at that point, and it's going to hit lows. But overall, I think you have to keep that consistent message out there.
You know, Ken, one of the things that we've talked about on the J team is that I know years down the road, we're going to see some sort of program, and it's going to be probably different than what we see today. And I certainly know that what we were doing in the Santa Clarita Valley 5, 6, 7 years ago is way different than what we're doing today. So in order to keep things fresh, you have to be flexible. You have to continually reevaluate. You have to look at the new challenges that are going on, and you have to have the motivated team members that are going to carry that message forward and make those changes. And I think that's critical to the success of a program and getting on the very front end of the next problem, because there will be a next problem.
The only thing I would add to that, Ken, is I think one of the values, the value that we find in the Defiant program is that it is a peer-led program. And most of you will know in talking to teens or in working with teens, any word that a peer shares with them is gospel. And if you have a parent or an adult sort of pushing that message, the kid hears it and it will stay with them, but there is something about your peer, telling you, that's not cool. Don't do that. And getting involved and developing those leadership skills. So once they start, being the leaders on campus and helping their friends develop those refusal skills, they're carrying that with them throughout, their junior high and high school years.
May I ask a follow-up question of Ingrid? You were talking about the Defiant program. Does it also have incentives for the students?
Absolutely.
And social aspect to it?
Yes, there are many incentives and social activities for the program. We have a dodgeball tournament where we actually, had parents and teens there. The parents were cheering their kids on, so that's a way for us to engage the parents. We had a summer splash party at our aquatic center for all of the Defiant members where there were games and food and activities. We also have activities that take place on the campus. We encourage each of the club advisors that are school teachers on the campus to develop activities that are specific to their culture on their campuses. So there's movie nights and just different things that the kids enjoy and that they want to do. So it's not the adults sort of guiding it, but more so just helping them facilitate and the kids driving what their interests are in participating in the program.
Thank you. And I know we're running out of time here, so what I'd like to do is ask each of you one last question to kind of bring it all together and then also focus kind of going forward and on the future. And I'm going to segue off the comments that Captain Becker just made, which he basically said that change is constant. So if we look at what we did 5, 6, 7 years ago, we're probably not doing the same thing we're doing than what we're doing now, and maybe even a shorter time span because change is so not only constant, but it's so quick. So with that, what I'd like to hear from each of the different cities is, what are your plans over the next several months as it relates to this issue, and are there opportunities as we look at these issues for us to work together? We're going to start with Thousand Oaks because
I refuse to answer. I want to go last. As far as the technology, a lot of things in our lives is technology driven. And with this problem and working together, we want to use technology to make us more effective and make us more efficient, not only in sharing information with each other, but attacking the problem. And what is new? What are you seeing? What trends that you're seeing, especially our law enforcement partners in Los Angeles County? If they're seeing something and communicating with us, hey, we're seeing this, it's in the infancy stage, and this is what we're doing about it, it really helps us. So that's something that we look at now, but the changes, even the past year, one of the panelists had mentioned bath salts and spice, the synthetic drugs that are out there, those are ever changing. That's on top of the prescription drug and the heroin problem, on top of alcohol and weed, and all the other illicit drugs have not gone away. This is just the greater problem right now, and the greater problem, and what I mean by that, it's killing our youth across the country. and it's impacting families, it's impacting crime, it's impacting quality of life everywhere we are. So it's the constant communication, it's forums like this where we share information. I learned a lot, especially from Santa Clarita, just staying on top of new trends and communicating about it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think I would echo those comments. We've started what we call Coffee with a Cop. We just had one of the forums last week, and we continue to do them. We plan on continuing to do them into the future. One of the reasons we're doing that is because we need to find different avenues to get out in the community and find out what's important, to look at what those changing trends are, and to find out if we're properly addressing them. It's also a good way to measure our level of service. The other way that, and I've gone to a lot of these meetings, as I mentioned earlier, but going to these community groups such as Not One More, there's a tremendous amount of information that's in that audience. And just taking the time to sit and talk with those people, I mean, they're living nightmares in most cases. If something's changing, they're going to be the first people to know about it. And I think it's imperative that we maintain that relationship with them, and we can help each other by keeping that communication alive.
Great, thank you.
You know, I think really where we're going to be focusing is working on the desire to consume narcotics in the Santa Clarita Valley. We have got to work on that. We have got to shift mindsets. And I am a firm believer that the education programs is where we need to be, and we need to be at the 11 and 12-year-old level to get that done and work it all the way through. That's going to be our priorities as the next year continues, and the DeFi-IT program, if you want to talk about that.
Yes, for the DeFi-IT program, we definitely want to improve what we're doing and increase the numbers of participation in the program. We had elementary school assemblies that we piloted this past year. We have a curriculum that was developed by Kathy Hunter, and because it was a pilot, we were only able to reach a certain number of schools. This year, we're implementing a new model where we'd like to implement this program in all of the elementary schools without using additional resources, or not much of an additional resource. And then finally, I would say that we definitely want to focus on developing a community coalition. In Santa Clarita, there are so many folks that are doing great things. And so what we want to be able to do is coordinate all the efforts among the different agencies here, nonprofits, community-based organizations, grassroots organizations, faith-based organizations, bring all of those stakeholders together and have a strategic effort in terms of how we look at reducing the desire to consume substance abuse in Santa Clarita, as well as speaking the same language and being more strategic in our efforts and knowing the trends and being on the same page in terms of how we respond and who's providing what service and where those gaps are.
Give you a couple of other really specific projects that we're working on right now. We have two nonprofits that are looking at putting in a sober high school so that we have something to offer our students who come out of rehab and that are really at a high likelihood of recidivism, and that if we can transition them to a sober school for, whether it's a semester or a full year or however long the student needs it prior to putting them back on a comprehensive campus, it would hopefully help them really establish their sobriety before being back with their peers. Another project that we're working on actively that we're hoping actually will be able to unveil within a few months is also a mobile trailer, much like your stop trailer and our share tolerance trailer. This one's called The Experience, and it's actually dedicated to families who have lost somebody to drug addiction. And it's an educational vehicle that will also go from school to school, different community events. People will be able to walk through, see video, hear from people who have had those losses, and they'll also be staffed by a counselor, so it will be where a counseling session could take place inside the actual vehicle. Obviously, we're increasing the assemblies out at the elementary schools, and one of the other things we're doing with DeFi-IT goes to your question, which is the incentives. One of the things students have asked for, particularly junior high, is for us to work with our community partners as far as businesses, which we are doing, to see if local business will get on board and help support incentives to offer to students who are making that choice to be drug-free and be part of that program, along with being able to challenge parents to be the ones, instead of throwing the parties with the alcohol and having everyone over, much like they do when kids are playing on soccer teams and things in elementary schools, the parents of the kids in the clubs actually rotating social activities. So this parent might provide a movie night, this parent might provide a game night at their house, somebody else might sponsor, Six Flags, whatever, but really getting the parents actively engaged in providing those social opportunities for our kids who are in those clubs, so they don't go seeking out other types of things in the community that aren't going to be healthy for them. So those are things that we have on the table right now that we're hoping will all come into place during this next year.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I want to close the panel discussion today, but I want to applaud your efforts and the impact that you're all having on not only the potential kids, but the parents, the families, and really the community at large. I want to also acknowledge the fact that each of these communities has not buried their head in the sand and said, "Hey, we're an affluent community that we don't have problems, that we don't have issues." Each of these communities has stepped up and said, "Hey, you know what? We have issues, and we're going to address those issues, and we're addressing those issues for the betterment of our communities." And again, I really want to applaud your willingness to do that. As we heard today, there are so many community people and community partners who feed into this effort. And as each of the panelists have acknowledged, it's not law enforcement that can do it or can do it alone. It's not the city that can do it alone, and it's certainly not the school districts that can do it alone. And so I also want to acknowledge one of the nonprofit partners that was acknowledged up here, and that's Action, which has been crucial in our efforts here in Santa Clarita as well as in the other communities. I also want to acknowledge one of our local media outlets, KHTS, which has also been very, very vital in our efforts to get the word out and to communicate, and been very aggressive. And I know that you all have, and have mentioned those same partners in your communities. But again, I want to thank the panelists from the City of Thousand Oaks, the City of Simi Valley, as well as the City of Santa Clarita. And really, I look very much forward to the next year in working with you, with all of your agencies collectively, so that we can continue to put together programs and services that really address this issue head on. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.